On today's show, we'll be reviewing the Memorial Cup final in which the London Knights blew the Medicine Hat Tigers out of the water.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects, and on today's episode, we'll be breaking down the Memorial Cup final. The action in the CHL is now finished for the 2024-25 season, and it ended with the London Knights raising the Memorial Cup that they lost out on in the final game of last year. So a very strong group of players here with the London Knights finally hoisting up the trophy in the last year where this group as an entirety could do it. So that is a great end to this kind of era of the London Knights, which I think has so much going for it in terms of the structure they play, the buy-in in every single role that the team has, and just the cohesion with which they play, as we'll be breaking down here in the first segment. So we'll be spending this first portion of the episode breaking down the game itself, what decided it for the London Knights, what were the difference-making factors between these two teams, and then we'll move on a little bit more later on in the show to do check-ins with the top prospects on both of these teams. Just how good was Sam Dickinson in this game? Easton, Cowan, Denver, Barkey, some really big difference-making players for the London Knights in this game, but also some very exciting prospects for NHL teams in the very near future. And then finally, we'll wrap things up by looking at the Medicine Hat Tigers. They have some high-end prospects here, including the prospective #1 selection in the 2026 draft, Gavin McKenna. We'll be breaking down how he just dominated certain shifts in this game and was at the crux of the comeback effort from the Medicine Hat Tigers. And we'll also check in with guys like Caden Lindstrom and Andrew Basha and the other players there with Medicine Hat that deserve call-outs here in terms of how they performed in the final and how their seasons have been going, because a lot of quality between these two teams. So before we jump into today's show, make yourself settled, get comfortable, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So the London Knights, they won this game by a very convincing margin, a 4-1 victory, and it was just a fantastic culmination to the season for the Knights. A really, really tremendous lineup in terms of quality, top to bottom, whether you're talking about the intensity and offensive drive of guys like Easton, Cowan, or that defensive solidity and marauding offensive activations from players like Sam Dickinson. There is so much variety in this team. You had players like Landon Sim bring in a real level of physicality in the middle six offensively. Sam O'Reilly was tremendous, especially in this final game, putting his body on the line, blocking shots, getting involved offensively. Was involved on a goal that didn't count. It was disallowed because he did run into Harrison Menigan, the goaltender of the Medicine Hat Tigers, before he wrapped around the net and passed it to Easton Cowan for a goal that was then taken back. Every single piece on this team came to play, and Austin Elliot, the goaltender, was a massive part of this. Very old goaltender for the CHL, right? Like, he is already a 21-year-old, and his CHL career was looking a little bit darker just like 8 months ago when he'd been playing with the Saskatoon Blades. It was his fourth season playing games with that team, and after 3 games and winning all 3 of those, he was placed on waivers. Nobody claimed him in the WHL, and he passed into the OHL waivers, and I think he was selected. He was picked up, I want to say, by the Barrie Colts, but I could be wrong on that, before he was then traded to the London Knights. And as soon as he arrived in London, he put up a .924 save percentage this season, a 32-1 record. That's 32 wins and 1 loss. That's pretty good. I thought the stat on screen yesterday on TSN had a typo in it because it said that his win percentage was a 967, and I was like, that can't be right. And then I looked, and it was correct. So a really insane season there in the regular season, and he was also fantastic in the playoffs. But he came to play most of all here in the final, stopping all but one shots. I believe there was like almost 35 shots on goal in this game that he had to stop, and put up a 969 save percentage. Was not always the most controlled in the crease. There was some flailing, there was some desperation, but he always managed to find a way to stop pucks. And it was against a lineup that he was very familiar with, as he had been a WHL goaltender for the previous 3 seasons and played against Medicine Hat a fair amount. I mean, even look, the top defenseman, the number 1D for Medicine Hat, Tanner Molendijk, his goaltender for his entire career, pretty much, with Saskatoon. The starting netminder had been Austin Elliot, and now he's facing him in a Memorial Cup final and ended up losing. And Elliot was a very big piece of that reason. So a lot of reasons kind of contributed to the eventual victory here in this game for the London Knights. But I wanted to highlight a couple different things. We're going to talk a bit more about the individual players and their roles in the next segment for London specifically. Guys like Cowan and Barkey and Dickinson, of course, deserve to be lauded for their performances in this game. But I want to talk a bit more about the structure and the game plan here for this game that London carried out beautifully. It was a very high intensity kind of game plan. Restrict space, force Medicine Hat to make plays from the periphery, and most of all, stifle their rush creation. Medicine Hat is a dominant rush attacking team with players like, of course, Gavin McKenna and Caden Lindstrom and Andrew Basha. Oasis Wiesblad, like, they have so much talent. Hunter St. Martin as well, very speedy player, drafted by the Florida Panthers last year. A lot of quality in motion at speed, and London did so well, not just to contain play to the outside, but to keep very tight gaps and to kill plays along the walls even before crossing into their own defensive zone. They were very aggressive, they were stepping up, but they weren't aggressive in terms of leaving chasms of space behind them in terms of like these desperation things. It was just because they were so structured, they were able to play aggressively in certain areas, and they doubled up with their wingers, and they had extra support down low, and they were able to make these big plays to close those gaps, constrict that space, and force very quick decisions from Medicine Hat under heavy pressure. And those plays didn't always connect. There were, of course, like some misfired passes, and London was always hounding on those pucks and bringing it right back the other way. That counter-attacking style was really at the forefront in this game, and that combination of intensity, understanding the game plan, doubling down on defensive work rate, and an understanding that through hard work and defensive solidity, you can create opportunities for your skill to shine. That was the name of the game for London, and they carried it out wonderfully. You did not see players on the Knights trying to dangle around opponents and trying to do all these fancy things. It was very quick, pacey, dump and chase, quick give and go, direct kind of attacking, and they made the most of it. And that kind of directness and intensity was just a bit too much for Medicine Hat to handle, especially in the early second period. The floodgates just opened, and whether it be through great screens at the net front, like Sam O'Reilly on the second or third goal that London scored on a point shot. That was Denver Barkey's goal. And it was just a puck that kind of got floated towards the top corner of the net that Menegan would have easily saved had he seen the puck. But O'Reilly just planted himself at the net front, didn't budge, and Medicine Hat was too slow to get him out of that position, and London was able to capitalize. So this game plan, this intensity, this desire to just outwork your opponents on every shift. And this is not to say that Medicine Hat did not work hard in this game. They were also dogs on pucks. They were really trying to ramp up the pace. But London is a bit older. They're a bit more experienced. They've been in this position last year and they lost. That, I think, was a really big difference-making factor in this game, where they knew what it took to make that level of difference, because they were on the other side of that flip coin last year. And I thought that they did a great job at making seemingly 50-50 battles more like 55-45 ones. They were just finding small advantages with quick little stick lifts, getting underneath opponents, initiating contact, being hard to play against consistently. They were just very difficult to cut open. And we saw the only player that was really able to do so in the third period when it mattered most was Gavin McKenna. And he has the superstar level skill that we'll talk about later on in the third segment as well, that was very much on display despite coming out on the losing side in this game. But because London was just so compact, they were structured, they were methodical, and they were so very detailed and hardworking in every single aspect of the game that this was a near perfect system performance for a junior level final game. Like Dale Hunter got his troops very organized for this performance, and after losing the game in the round robin, a 3-1 victory for Medicine Hat in that one, a truly convincing win here for the London Knights, where so many top prospects shone very brightly in what was, for I think many players on the ice, the biggest hockey memory that they're going to keep for a very, very long time. Apart from maybe your players that are going to go on to have 1,000-game NHL careers, a lot of these players on this London Knights team, this might have been their last run and this kind of setting on this kind of stage. So to see an old team, a team with a lot of players that are going to graduate next season, doing it and finishing things off here in the final was great to see. And they were very much led by a couple of players I've adored since their draft eligible campaigns. And we'll dig in a bit more to that with guys like Cowan and Barkey and Dickinson in the next segment. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in on the game, before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever before to play smart and win big. Which players do you think are going to step up when it matters most? Is it going to be a superstar player, or is it going to be the depth gem that you always knew would step up in these key moments and make a big name for themselves, enshrining their last names in franchise history? The choice is always yours with FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's talk a bit more about the London Knights and the specific players who shone in this game now. And I wanted to highlight about 6 or 7 guys here for this segment. And starting off with the captain, the player who scored 2 goals in this game, the player who's been battling injuries, absolute dog in the offensive zone, and a player who, with an ankle injury in the semifinal in the OHL, he missed then the entire playoffs after that in the OHL. Maybe he came back a little bit in the OHL Cup final. I could be wrong about that, but very visibly still injured, still playing on an ailing ankle in this game. He was wincing. He was gliding back to the bench after particularly long shifts, and overall was just very clearly there to be a moral support for his team, to lead by example. And not only did he do that, he scored 2 goals. Half the goals scored by the London Knights in this game came off the stick of their captain. The first off a breakaway where made a quick little move onto his forehand, kept things simple, didn't overcomplicate things, and beat Madigan down low on that breakaway. Had to look behind him to make sure it went into the net, but immediately exploded with elation and celebration after that. And he's a player I've just adored watching since his draft year campaign with the London Knights, despite being very undersized, right? 5'9", sub 160 pounds. He's one of the hardest workers on the ice on every shift, and he brings intensity, pace, speed and playmaking skill on top of just playing the game the right way. And he's benefited massively over the course of the last 2 seasons since getting picked up by the Philadelphia Flyers in the third round in 2023. And last year, of course, had a 102-point campaign in 64 games. And this year did almost even better on a per game basis, scoring 82 points in 50 regular season games. And he's a player I think that Philadelphia Flyers fans can really be excited to adding into their professional core. Whether like he's going to probably take a couple of years to play in the NHL, especially in terms of filling out his frame a bit further, just adding some weight and being able to resist the NHL pace and intensity. But I think he'll be able to adapt quite nicely to the AHL. We've seen this from players in somewhat similar molds like Xavier Simoneau with the Laval Rocket in recent seasons, of even if the size lacks, the intelligence, the intensity, the playmaking skill, these things can really, really elevate the player at the AHL level. So very exciting there for Denver Barkey, who I cannot wait to see in a professional environment where I think he'll be challenged significantly more than he was this season, and a guy I could easily see settling into a third line checking skill role with the Flyers long term. Moving on, we have his partner in crime from all of these seasons, and that's Easton Cowan, another player who almost scored 2 goals in this game. One was taken back, but he still finished with a goal in this performance, and he was truly, truly key to London. He won the MVP honors for the Memorial Cup. He was very clearly one of the most impactful players on the ice whenever he stepped foot on it, and really capped off an excellent campaign here this season again. Like, the production was down a bit from last year, but there was a real level of maturity in his game. He wasn't trying to chase point totals, wasn't trying to create with every puck touch. He was looking to connect and support incessantly, playing a style of play that's going to translate wonderfully to the professional realm. And I think that the Maple Leafs got an absolute gem there at 28th overall in 2023, and it was viewed as a bit of a reach at the time. And even though I had him lower on my board than he ended up going on draft day, as soon as they made that pick, I was like, yeah, this is going to be fun, because he's a player that, at least in my heart's rankings, was very much in that 25 range, but I think I ended up having more towards 40 because, again, he was smaller. There wasn't the same level of hype for him going into the draft class, and I was expecting him to go more in that late second range. So when he ended up going inside the first, I thought, yeah, I see it, and he immediately blew the doors off the barn there in his D+1 campaign with the Knights, and only looked better this season. He's a player I think is going to be really, really good for the Toronto Maple Leafs in short order, and I think he'll be able to support skill pieces in that lineup very, very well. Moving on, we have Sam Dickinson, the big left shot defenseman, 6'3", 209 pounds. Only turns 19 in like a week's time on June 7th. He's still a very young player after having gone drafted 11th overall last season, really falling to that slot. And that was after scoring 70 points in 68 games last year. And this year he scored 29 goals and 91 points in 55 appearances. That is absurd. There's no other way to really describe that in terms of production. It's absurd. And he really shone in terms of that activation ability in this game specifically. What I loved the most was he was stepping up at the blue line, had directly an assist off of that because it caused the Denver Barkey breakaway there in the second period. Really good stick there to prevent, not only prevent the entry, but also just to get the puck into the middle of the ice, into the neutral zone, and Barkey was able to pick that up and just speed into the offensive zone. And he finished with 3 assists on the 4 goals in this game. He had the most points of any player in this final, and really just a cherry on top for a tremendous campaign. Not necessarily the most mature player in every facet in terms of the mental side of the game just yet, but physically, he looks the part of a 28 NHL player. Really, really well built, great skater, very physically involved. The decision making, I thought, in this game was a lot more controlled than I'd seen for much of this season. So, guy who's definitely on an upward trend, and I think the San Jose Sharks have an absolute gem on their hands with this player. But moving on, we have Henry Bruce Davids, a top prospect in this year's draft class, will likely go in that 28 to 45 range. So either end of the first round or in the first half of the second. Very good skater. And I thought that defensively, he was very disruptive in this game. There were a couple odd man rushes that he stifled with just really good gap management and an active stick, was able to get stick lifts in when it mattered most and keep the play to the periphery. I thought that he, if anything, raised his draft stock in this final and certainly played an important role down the lineup for the London Knights down the stretch here. And I mean, contributed a lot offensively as well, despite not getting all that many offensive puck touches relative to like ice time. If he played on a different team, he certainly would have gotten a lot more of those. And still, he was able to score 42 points in 67 games this campaign. A very convincing performance from Henry Bruce Davids. But to wrap up this segment, I did want to talk a little bit more about the goaltender, Austin Elliot. We already broke down kind of his career path in the CHL, going from the WHL and the Saskatoon Blades to the OHL. But let's look a bit more ahead at where he might go in the future. And he's headed to UMass Lowell next season in the NCAA. He's already committed there. I think that's a great next step, especially now with the new NCAA decision from November or October to allow CHL alums to go the college route. I think it's a great place for players like this who finished their junior careers on really big highs, but might not get drafted, or in this case, aren't eligible to be drafted anymore, to go that college route. And I believe he's also already earned a training camp invite with the Toronto Maple Leafs in the offseason. So definitely something to keep an eye on there as well. So I think that Austin Elliott really did cement himself as a noteworthy prospect in this game and in this season in general, right? I mean, a 32-1 record is almost unheard of. I mean, is it unheard of? I don't know. I think it should be. It's insane. So that wraps up this segment on the London Knights and their players. In the next one, we're going to wrap up the show by delving into the games of a couple Medicine Hat Tigers and how they may have affected their stocks, either in terms of like next year's draft or overall how they're trending as prospects through this season's run, an absolutely noteworthy run to winning the WHL J. Ross Robertson Cup, and then also really giving the London Knights a run for their money here. I mean, beating them in the round robin as well and making their way to the finals as a very young team. So lots to look forward to still in this episode. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. All righty, let's wrap up the show here, breaking down the Memorial Cup final, and it was such an exciting game. Like the last game of the CHL season never really disappoints. It's always exciting. The emotion is always level to that of like Stanley Cup finals. It's so clear that it means everything to these players, and it's so heartbreaking too to see the heartbreak in their eyes after the final whistle when they do actually lose. And that was the case for the Medicine Hat Tigers in this game. You saw the heartbreak in the faces, in the hearts, and the postures of the entire team in the handshake line and after the final, after the game ended, of course. And overall, I thought that it was a really good performance from Medicine Hat. They just could not like tear apart this particular team. They were able to do it pretty much against every opponent this season off the rush with their dynamism, their creativity, their pace, their intensity, their offensive skill being almost unparalleled. I mean, especially a player like Gavin McKenna has no equal in the CHL in terms of what he's able to do with the puck on his stick. And it just wasn't enough in this game. This was a game that was won by structure, not by elite skill. And the Medicine Hat Tigers had the best player in this game, the best player on paper, and the best player on the ice. Gavin McKenna was the most dynamic player on puck in this game. We saw it in the third period with the goal he scored, the goal that was disallowed, just finding ways to support even when it wasn't just dangling through opposition. We did still see that. There were rushes in the last 5 minutes of the game where Gavin McKenna just absolutely embarrassed a couple of London defenders at the blue line to get into controlled entry, but it just wasn't sustained. And that final play, the final shot, the final pass just wasn't there in this game for Medicine Hat. So they ended up losing. And I still thought that these players really did show just how fantastic they are, not just in terms of their skill and their mechanics and their physicality or their skating abilities, but in how they think the game. And this is really like the ultimate level of junior hockey in terms of pace, intensity, and high-end thinking being like a difference-making factor. And I thought multiple players on Medicine Hat were able to show that and create advantages in this game. And of course, we have to start with Gavin McKenna, the player who is overwhelmingly likely going to be the first overall selection in 2026, who just put up a truly historic season in his D-1 campaign, scoring 41 goals and 129 points in 56 games. It was like literally insane. I think he also had like a 50-game point streak in there, and he continued scoring pretty much every single game. He scored a point in every game here in the Memorial Cup final, in the Memorial Cup as a whole, and overall was just the best player on the ice most times that he was on it. And there's a lot of rumblings of him going the NCAA route next season, and my colleague and good friend over at Elite Prospects, Cam Robinson, wrote about this as well. So I'll link his article in the description down below. So Gavin McKenna is going to be touring around multiple campuses in the NCAA, but will not make a decision on where he will play next season until after the draft. Very clearly, McKenna, his agent, his surroundings want to take their time to make this decision and be careful about it, not making it the day after or 2 days after the most heartbreaking loss in this young player's career. And I think that's a very wise choice. And there's going to be a lot of suitors lining up for his services. In terms of potential candidates that are being thrown out there is Penn State, Michigan State, and Michigan. Three very good development programs. Penn State has just also likely, not confirmed just yet, but likely secured the services of Jackson Smith, who is still making his final deliberations at the moment of where he wants to pursue his career, either for next season or the year after that, at the college level. And I mean, Gavin McKenna and Jackson Smith would work wonderfully together there if he ended up going that direction. But I would absolutely love to see him going specifically to the Michigan Wolverines. It is the best development program that in college over the last decade in terms of consistency. And last season was a bit disappointing for them. They didn't have the same level of skill and talent and experience that they usually do. And it was clear the on-ice performances were a bit inconsistent, and Michael Hage was not able to do everything on his own to drive the offense there for that team. So bringing in a player like Gavin McKenna on top of a lot of more like responsible players that are being added already for next season, like Cole McKinney, who is a first-line center for the NTDP this campaign. I think that would be a great route for Gavin McKenna in terms of pursuing his development in the NCAA. And I think Michigan would be a great place for him to land, but we'll see what his decision ends up being. But moving on, we still have a couple of players here from the Tigers to talk about. And let's kick off with Caden Lindstrom, a player who has not played much in the last year, only came back healthily in the postseason, playing 4 games in the WHL playoff in the finals for his team, scoring 2 goals and 4 points in that stretch, and struggling a bit more here in the Memorial Cup, and not putting up a single point in the 3 games that he dressed, including both against the London Knights. And he did have 2 minor penalties in this game for the Medicine Hat Tigers. One of those hurt specifically because I thought it was a wrong call actually from the ref. It was a face-off violation, like right off the draw on starting a power play for Medicine Hat, trying to turn things around there in the 3rd period. And they ruled that it was a hand pass off the draw, but he was cheeky about it. It was, sure, the power of that pass came from his hand, but his stick, like the shaft of his stick, was down like on the ice, and he was pushing the shaft, and the shaft was pushing the stick. So the shaft of the stick just came right between his hand and the puck. And that's kind of what a pass is you use your hands to use your stick to pass the puck. He did that in a more creative, more borderline way, but not in a play that I thought deserved to be a penalty in any way, shape, or form. And they even reviewed it and still maintained that call, which I just thought was wrong. So that stung a bit for Medicine Hat in that game. But I thought Lindstrom was relatively involved physically, still very clearly struggling to like just maintain that pace. And I mean, just being like catapulted back, not only into like end of season action, but WHL finals and then Memorial Cup after missing an entire year to injury. that's going to take a level of adapting to get back to that level of pace. And I thought that it was clear that he's missed some time in this game, but still was able to show that his shot off the rush is a real dangerous tool. I think Columbus Blue Jackets fans, look, it's going to take some time with this player. He's going to have to catch up on this missed development. Don't expect him to be in your NHL lineup in the next 2 years, but boy, the upside is still very exciting. The tools, the creativity, the intelligence, the ferocity on both sides of the puck. A player with really, really high potential, but clearly who still has to catch up a bit on his development. So definitely still a player to keep your eye on, and I'd love to see him go back to Medicine Hat next season for one more full year in the WHL to just dominate, because this might be his team next season rather than Gavin McKenna's. And if that's the case, I'd love to see him try to bring his team right back to the Memorial Cup to contend there again next year. But to wrap up the show, we have 2 more players I wanted to highlight. And first and foremost, we have of the Nashville Predators, Tanner Molendijk, the smooth skating left shot defenseman who's going to be making the jump to pro hockey here after this season. And I think he's going to be a great fit in the AHL. He's a very good thinker of the game, really solid rush defender, using his feet to match footwork, be aggressive, to keep those tight gaps. But also, what he's really implemented more and more and more into his game since being drafted is being proactive with his offensive activations. He's always been a guy who's tried to kind of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks offensively, and being very, very active offensively in that case, but not necessarily being the most refined or controlled. But in the last 3 seasons, we've seen him just really gain a sense of composure and reliability and consistency in his own end, and his breakouts that I thought really just like flowed into the offense. He was just so fluid offensively in this game as well, making sound decisions, connecting plays, making pacey passes, trying to get especially Gavin McKenna into the game as much as possible, doing everything he could for his team at this level. And I think he's going to be a really good piece for the Predators as a potential second pairing puck mover down the road. But last but not least, I also wanted to shout out Andrew Basha, a player who I thought left his heart on his sleeve in this game. Really hard worker, constantly pushing the pace as the assistant captain here with the Medicine Hat Tigers, and was able to create a bit off the rush with his playmaking ability. But I thought physically was also contained to the periphery quite well by the London Knights defense. He was struggling to get to the middle lane, to the inside, and off the rush was just getting played by the body and getting separated from the puck, and struggled a little bit with that. So I thought that there were some growing pains perhaps in this final, where he's going to have to get a bit better at maintaining a low center of gravity, trying to out leverage bigger, heavier opponents, and not just getting pushed off the puck as easily as he did in this game, again against very physical and intense opposition at the most intense level of junior hockey there is. But still, I thought that it was a good performance for Basha, and a player that Calgary Flames fans should be excited to have in their ranks. But that wraps things up here for today's show. If you watched the game, what were your takeaways from these performances in the Memorial Cup final? A really, really pacey game. I thought that I saw a really nice give it a push and tug a bit in the first period, and then London just dominated that second and was so solid in the third period to retain that lead. But I'd love to hear from your takeaways from this game. Which players stood out the most to you, and who you're most excited to seeing in an NHL uniform down the road from the players in this game. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. We always appreciate our everydayers here on the podcast. And for your second listen, you're going to head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you need to know to build yourself a competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. That's all from me today. I'm your host, Sebastian High. Thank you so much for listening as always, and I'll catch you listening again very, very soon.